Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. So let's get on to covering multiple choice questions for prelims 2020 and question number 1. Which of the following are envisaged by the right to freedom of religion in the Constitution of India? So basically, as per this question, right to freedom of religion in India includes what? Number 1, freedom from payment of taxes for promotion of any religion. Number 2, right of minorities to establish and administer educational institutions. Third is the prohibition of discrimination on grounds of religion. And the last is freedom of conscience. Select the correct answer, and the options are 1 and 4 only, 1 and 2 only, 2, 3 and 4 only, and 3 and 4 only. So these are the 4 options. No, none of the options is having all these 4 as the correct. So we have to choose the correct ones from these 4 and do read this question. It's from polity, and polity should be at the tips of our fingers. So let's get on to the explanation part now. So herein, as per the Constitution, right to freedom of religion categorically include these rights. Article from 25 article to 28. So categorically these are the 4 rights. Article 25 is about the freedom of conscience and free profession, practice and propagation of religion. So freedom of conscience is our keyword here. And Article 26 is about freedom to manage religious affairs. Article 27 is about freedom from payment of taxes for promotion of any religion. And Article 28 is about freedom from attending religious instructions or worship in certain educational institutions. Now here, certain educational institution is our keyword here. If you are deliberately taking admission into an organization where religious instructions are imparted, then those educational institutions are not included. But largely, if it's a government owned, or usually we can think of any normal educational institutions, any CBSE school, if you are going into there, you are not being forced to attend any religious instruction, right? So this is very important. So under Article 25 to 28, we are having freedom to religion, and these includes these 4 points only. So herein, which of these 4s are having in our options here? So first one is definitely there, freedom from payment of taxes for promotion of any religion, that we have studied, and right of minorities to establish and administer educational institution, that we haven't studied here. So that means this is not a part of the freedom of religion. So we are to exclude point number 2. Point number 2 gone. Here also it's gone. We are having either A or D as the right answer. Now the third is prohibition of discrimination on grounds of religion. Now this too is not a freedom of religion. And the last one is definitely there, freedom of conscience. So answer becomes 1 and 4. If you are reading this for the first time, then it is definitely difficult, but then it's really important. So we just have to mug it up, that's it. And there is understanding involved as well. For example, in case number 3, that is prohibition of discrimination. So discrimination is our keyword here, and we know as per Article 15 prohibits discrimination on grounds of religion, race, sex, caste, place of birth, etc. So 3 is about the Article 15, and second is minority having the right to establish and administer educational institution. Herein we are to talk about Article 29 and 30th. Now these 2 are important, and we just call them cultural and educational rights. Please memorize. So these includes the right of minorities to establish and administer educational institutions, and these are under Article 30 and Article 29. So we just have to mug it up. Further, under Article 15, we are being prohibited from discriminating anybody on grounds of religion, race, caste, sex or place of birth. So these things are important. They are included in part 3 of the Constitution. And that's it. So it might be little difficult for those of you who are reading them for the first time, but then it's really important. Take a screenshot or either read the Lakshmikant. But the point is, mug everything up very well, because questions are asked. So we are done with question number 1. And if you found this question difficult, then let me know. We'll try framing the easier one from next time onwards. Now, this is question number 2. With reference to commercial livestock rearing, consider the following statements. Very simple question. Commercial livestock rearing is our keyword here. So let's talk about it. Number 1. It is practiced on a large scale and involves simultaneous rearing of different animals. So large scale is point number 1, and second is rearing of different animals. So it could be cows, goats all together, horses, all of these together. Now, second is it is mainly practiced in the agrarian South Asian countries. So which of the statements given above is are correct? So herein, pause a bit and try to come up with the right answer. Even anybody can answer this question. It's not based on any factual detail. It's pure common sense. So let's see the answer now. Herein, none of these statements are correct, because whenever we are to talk about commercial livestock rearing, then definitely it is to be done on a commercial scale. That means on a large scale, but that does not include rearing different sort of animals. No, largely one type of animal is reared. This is how it's being done on a commercial level. And the second is, it is mainly practiced in the agrarian South Asian countries. No, because largely South Asian economies are developing nations, or they are poor economies. So they are not having means to go for commercial livestock rearing. Rather, whatever they are doing is just for their own subsistence. So that makes statement number 2 as incorrect. So let's look at the details right now. So here, in case of commercial livestock, which is more organized and capital intensive, you are supposed to buy lot of tools and this and that. So that make it a capital intensive, which is associated with the Western culture, because we are having labor shortages over there. So everything is mechanized, and they are having permanent ranches, and they cover large areas divided into parcels, and they are also fenced, and their animals are provided with a grazing ground which is fenced. So when the grass of one parcel is grazed, animals are moved to another parcel. So animals are not tied permanently, just like we do in India, unlike we do it in India, but they are having a parcel which is a very large area, but that is permanently fenced. So within that very parcel or fenced area, animals are free to graze around, to move here and there, but once the entire grass is grazed, then animals are moved to another parcel. So that's how it is done. Here again, the number of animals that are kept are according to the carrying capacity of the pasture. So this is either way obvious. Now this is important. This is a specialized activity in which only one type of animal is reared. So they are not different type of animals, they are just one. It could be either sheep, cattle, goats and horses. And they are reared to do what? To obtain these many products: meat, wool, hides and skin. These are processed, packed, that too scientifically, and then they are exported to different world markets, largely to the European nations. And further, it's organized on a scientific basis. Proper care is done in terms of how they're going to be breeding, how they're going to be having genetic improvements, how they're going to be going for disease control, and proper health is taken care of them by the owners. So that's it. Largely the nations that are involved in commercial livestock rearing is these: New Zealand, Australia, Argentina, Uruguay, United States of America. So please memorize all these names. It's New Zealand, Australia, Argentina, Uruguay and USA. So that's it. We are done with question number 2 as well. As such, statements were simple, but the explanation part also carries certain details that we have to memorize for mains as well as for prelims, especially the names of these countries. So that's it. Now let's get on to, because herein, even though USA, New Zealand, Australia, they are developed nation, but New Zealand and Australia, they are largely dairy sector driven or agriculture driven. So let's get on to question number 3. So this is with reference to manufactured sands, that is M sand. Now herein, UPSC can even ask M sand stands for what? It's a manufactured sand. Consider the following statements. So number 1, it is a chemically created in laboratories by crushing glass and fly ash. Is it so? Number 2, it is used in the construction industry. And the third is, Tamil Nadu is the highest M sand producing state in India. So which of the statement given above is correct? 1 and 3 only, 2 only, 1 and 2 only, 1, 2 and 3 only. So option reading is really boring. So let's get on to the answer straight away. So herein, manufactured sand is not chemically created. No, it's just that instead of waiting for the river to crush it and give us the needed size of sand, we human being on our own crush these rocks, these stones into the needed size, that is less than or up to 150 microns. So this is how the manufactured sand is obtained. It's not chemically produced, but we just crush the rocks, these stones, and make it to the needed size, that is 150 microns. That's it. That's why we call it manufactured sands. And now we just need to mug up the share of the various states in the production of manufactured sands. So Karnataka is the having highest share, that is 20 million metric tons, followed by Telangana 7.2 million metric ton. Numbers are not important, but the chronology is definitely important. Then we are having Tamil Nadu, Andhra and Gujarat. So number 1 में है Karnataka, फिर Telangana, फिर Tamil Nadu, फिर Andhra, फिर Gujarat. So let's mug it up again. It's Karnataka number 1, Telangana number 2, Tamil Nadu number 3, Andhra number 4, and Gujarat is at number 5. So that's it. So that make us say that only statement number 2 is correct, because it's a sand, so it is to be used in construction industry, no doubt about it. But it is not chemically created, and nor Tamil Nadu is the highest state, rather Karnataka is the highest state, as we have seen right here. So let's get on to the last question. So which of the following acts extended the principle of communal representation by providing separate electorates for women? Alright. So Indian Councils Act 1892, Indian Councils Act 1909, the Government of India Act 1919, the Government of India Act 1935. So question is simple. Please pause a bit and try to come up with the right answer. So herein the right answer is Government of India Act 1935. So yes, as per Government of India Act 1935, the British extended the communal representation to women, that's it, by providing them the separate electorate. So let's go into the details now. The Indian Council Act 1909, which we generally call as Morley-Minto reform. So because Morley was the Secretary of State and Minto was the Governor General. So that's how we call it, Morley-Minto reform. So they, for the very first time, introduced the communal representation for Muslims. So just for the Muslims, and herein communal representation means that only Muslim could elect Muslims and no other community, it could be Hindu or anybody, could vote for the Muslim candidate. So Muslims could vote for Muslim candidate. That's what we mean by communal representation. And this was given by Indian Council Act of 1909, which we call as separate electorate. So again, under Government of India Act 1919, the same very principle of communal representation or separate electorate was extended to Sikhs, Indian Christians, Anglo-Indians and Europeans. Please mug it up again. Sikhs, Indian Christians, Anglo-Indians and Europeans. And finally, the Government of India Act 1935 extended the principle of communal representation by providing separate electorate for women as well as labor, or we just call them workers. So women and labor were given the separate electorate as per the Government of India Act 1935. Very, very important, because so many questions are already been asked from this very Government of India Act 1935, and even a mains question too was asked. So I will be providing a link of a document in the description box. So please go through that link at least once. It is important for having good understanding about the Government of India Act 1935 for writing a good answer. So we are done for day 16, and if you haven't gotten over any of the question, then do let me know. We'll definitely be going through that very question again. So we are done. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.